Welcome to the MHP CashFlow Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of mobile home park investing, real estate strategies, and building long-term passive income. Hosted by Garrett, Terrell, real estate investor, mobile home park operator, and founder of Rocket Capital Fund.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the MHP CashFlow Podcast. I'm your host, Garrett Terrell, and today we have a special guest on the podcast in Mr. Mario Dattilo out of Florida, I believe, right?
Yep, Naples.
Awesome. And he currently owns 1,100 lots and has a wealth of knowledge, been in the industry for a while, and I'm excited to talk with him today. So, Mario, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for inviting me. Excited to be on, man. This is an awesome show, and I think you're doing something great for the industry, so excited to do it with you.
I appreciate it. Awesome. Yeah, so talk to me about your current mobile home park business. So you are in Florida, and how many mobile home parks do you own that consists of the 1,100 lots?
21.
21? Okay, 21
yep,
different
21.
communities.
So we're in 5 states. We're in Florida, Georgia, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Texas. We're under contract on a couple others in other states right now too. But we have a high concentration in the Southeast, Florida and Georgia specifically.
Nice.
And, you know, we've kind of been, I'm not new at it. I've been doing this a long time. So the portfolio has been slowly growing over the last 11 years. I started buying these communities in 2014 after I flipped houses for several years. Since 2008, I started flipping houses, and then 2013, I started looking for apartments, couldn't find apartment deals, and found a mobile home park. I was like, all right, this kind of looks like an apartment from an operations standpoint, and it was the best decision I ever made. I also own some self-storage RV parks, and some small bay light industrial as well. But generally, the focus has been on mobile home parks. Yeah,
that's amazing. So we have a pretty similar background because we both started in fix and flip, probably made good money, and then you're like, something's not like fulfilling here. Like, I got to find something else.
This is a job.
Yeah. It's a high paying job, but man, is it a job. And you're managing contractors, and it's you're basically like a glorified GC, you know?
For sure.
But you started buying these mobile home parks early. So what was it like back then buying in 2014? I mean, it's got to be
back in the good old days.
Difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were trailer
difference.
parks. They were trailer parks. Nobody wanted to touch them. It was awesome. You know, it was really, they didn't get popular until the late teens, like 2019, 2020. 2019 is really when people kind of started kicking up the interest in mobile home parks. They were, at least where it was noticeable to us, because people were chasing yield in the apartment space and couldn't get it. And so they started looking at storage and parks and kind of just went to the uglier properties to get the yield, right? And so, it was noticeably different. One thing that I would say is that it's created a new opportunity because, frankly, a lot of those people didn't know what the heck they were doing. And they bought stuff that they didn't understand, and they're paying for it now, or they're trying to get out. And so, you know, we're seeing more and more owners of parks that bought within the last few years go, you know what? Like, this is more than just owning dirt and collecting rent. Like, this is actually a business that I've got to operate, and it's fairly management and capital intense. And so they're kind of getting out because it was just more than they ever anticipated. They bought the guru crap that says that, you know, 1 hour a week kind of thing, it's going to be the easiest thing you ever managed. It's like a triple net lease, and it's really not. I mean, it's pretty management intense, especially on the turnaround properties. And so for a period of time there, it looked like it's just getting gobbled up. It is. There's consolidation happening still, and it'll continue to happen. But some of those people who got in did not understand what they were doing, and they just had access to easy, cheap money and blew themselves up. So,
wow. Yeah, I mean, the parks are made and broken in the management. I mean,
Yes.
you're in the management business. You're buying and setting up debt and capital stacking and all that, but you're really in the management business.
For sure. Yeah.
So
It's operationally intense. I wouldn't say quite as intense as apartments, or even self-storage can be pretty intense, especially on the larger facilities where you got full-time staff, stores at the front, things like that. U-Haul, that's pretty intense. You're running a business, but from a property management standpoint, I'd say it's, dead center in the middle. I mean, you can get crazy, hotels, things like that, and then you can get really boring, which is, your triple net single tenant buildings. But it's not anywhere near the triple net.
No.
It's not on the low end of the spectrum. I'd say it's definitely in the middle. So
Yeah. That's amazing. So what kind of parks are you buying? Are you buying tenant owned? Are you buying park owned? Are you more of a tenant owned guy versus a park owned guy? What's kind of your strategy?
All of our communities are tenant-owned home communities. We've bought some communities that were all park-owned and then converted them, but ultimately we move everything to a resident-owned community, not to be confused with ROC, which stands for resident-owned community, but where the residents actually own their homes in the community, and we want to get them as stable, as boring as possible, and run them more like a for-profit homeowners association than like a horizontal apartment building, like I've heard it called. And so that can be pretty management intense when taking over those park-owned home communities. But that's where we want to get to. We believe in, affordable home ownership, and that's what we're giving people with these communities. And that's where we want to get to on all of them. Yeah.
That's huge. And it seems like, because I've only been in the MHP space for a year, but
Sure.
Really hit a couple home runs in my first few parks that I purchased, and that's why I kind of fell in love with the industry. In your experience, I mean, in my experience so far, it seems like the big equity plays that you can make in some of these deals is converting the park-owned homes to the tenant-owned homes. Has that been your experience, and how have you done that?
Yeah, I mean, what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of people are turned off from the park-owned home communities, okay, because they don't want that rental model. But what they miss is that there's opportunity in it, in converting it. And it's because when you've got lot rents, let's say at $200 when market is $400, going in and raising people from $200 to $400, although people do it, I think it's unethical and it's just difficult to do. And it's hard on the residents. Like, we're not trying to burden the residents. Yes, we need to catch up to market rents so we can afford the costs that have increased over the last 20 years that the owner didn't raise rents. But doing it overnight isn't something that we want to do. But when you have a rental community and those homes come available, meaning you expire the lease, you move the tenant out because they're not going to be a homeowner, you sell that home and you bring that new resident in at full market rent. So you can really bring up the value of that property pretty rapidly by converting park-owned homes to lot rent. We don't really do too many conversions where you got a tenant that's been living in the home for a long time, and then you go to them and go, I'll give you $1,000 to take over this home and deal with the expenses of it. Because what we've found is that those people are just renters. And with no real skin in the game, without coming into it with a owner-buyer mentality, they're just going to default. The home's going to turn. It's going to be in worse condition than it was before. And then you're back to square one again. And you've basically got the same issue with a title problem now, right? Because you sold the home, they got the title. Now you got to do an abandoned title. You got to do all this crap to get the title back. Or I should have just sold it to the right person anyways. And the right person is a homeowner that's going to have pride of ownership, that's going to fight to keep that home. They're going to maintain it. They're going to reinvest in the home. Most renters don't have a clue what it takes to maintain these homes and to keep up on them because they've never had to. They've just been a renter, right? They just call the landlord when something's wrong. So now they just let it, they don't care that they own it because in their mind they spent $1,000 or $2,000 to get the title, and they're just not committed. So that's what we do. And there's a lot of upside in properly converting rentals to lot rent, and you can create major upside. Can I give you one other point that I think a lot of people miss on that?
Yeah.
I've seen guys buy stuff that they think they're going to convert from park-owned home to lot rent, right? Because that's their model. But what they don't understand is that the market doesn't support it. You can only do that strategy in markets that support a lot rent model. For example, we own in Atlanta, right? The Atlanta metro is great. High lot rents, high rents in general. It's a high income area. But when you go outside of Atlanta, the metro, you get into kind of a dirty South rental market, right? Low income, low rents. It is what it is. Rural. And so you go and try and sell homes, convert to lot rent there, it's a lot harder. There are pockets that you can do it, but I've seen people buy rental communities and rental markets and try and convert it, and then they're screwed because they modeled it wrong and couldn't execute on the business plan. So something to really understand.
I'm so glad you said that, because I feel like a lot of people in the MHP industry try to push like a narrative of like a one-size-fits-all model. You have to convert all these to tenant-owned home, and then you'll get better debt, and you'll increase the value of your property. It seems like what you're saying is it's not necessarily one-size-fits-all. You kind of have to analyze the deal and the market that it's in and see which tool to put it, in your tool belt into that deal. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, but I don't like the rental model. Personally, I think it's a horrible business. You might as well just go, if you're gonna run rentals, you might as well go buy an apartment building because you're buying better structures, right? So I don't buy those communities that can't be converted. So to answer your question, you just have to know what you're there to do and make sure the market supports the business plan that you're trying to do, because just because you want it to be a lot rent community doesn't mean that it's going to work. And so if you only want to operate lot rent communities, you need to just avoid those markets altogether. If you got the guts to operate rental communities, sure, then your markets, then you're okay with that. But most of the guys that I know that have owned communities for a longer period of time that are rentals, they all get super burnt out and hate their lives. Okay. So, and mass scale too. Like I got some friends that have owned for 7-8 years, and they owned, they've always been big proponents of rentals, right? They're like, yeah, we like the rental model. Ask them now what they think. They hate their lives, and they have a harder time exiting them. They have a harder time on the financing. And so I'm not saying that that's a myth. The myth isn't, that you can't exit the properties. You can exit them, but you're going to run into some challenges that in some cases can be resolved. I'm not saying that you're going to be stuck forever, but there's less banks, a lot less buyers, that are going to be attracted to that kind of an asset. So I think it's just knowing what you're trying to do and making sure that you're buying in the markets that will support that business model.
So for somebody new out there that's looking at a park-owned home community, converting it to a tenant-owned community, right? Because it obviously reduces the risk and we know all the benefits of it. But what are some of those key factors that you look for in your markets when you're doing your underwriting that allow a park-owned home to be successfully sold to a tenant-owned home?
Yeah, I mean, demographics are crucial. You've got to make sure that the income is high enough. You've got to make sure that the home values are high enough. You've got to make sure that I always make sure there's other lot rent communities in the market. I don't want to be the first guy with a new idea going into a market. Maybe I'm too conservative and careful, but if everybody else is running rental communities and your median household income is $39,000 and your median home value is $105,000, you got more guts than I do to go in there and try and sell homes. It's just not going to work. If it does, you lucked up. But typically you need to be in slightly higher, the old number used to be $100,000 for median household or median home value. That's years old. We're in 2024. Inflation's real, right? So, you really need to be at around $150,000 for there to be, some nicer homes there. And then for the income, 39,000, you're straight poor. Like you're dirt poor.
Yeah.
I don't even know how you live at 39,000 a year. So
it's poverty levels.
It's poverty. Yeah, that's actually the right word. It's poverty. And so I want to make sure that the homeowners that are buying from me actually make enough money to afford it. Like if you're at 39,000 a year, you're probably Section 8 qualified, right? So you should be getting subsidized housing at that point. We don't do any subsidies. So I think it's just understanding and making sure that you're not the first guy to try it in your market. If you got other lot rent communities, you got very clear comps, there should be a little bit of confidence there.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about debt on your parks. Are you buying these with hard money, with creative? I mean, obviously we're all looking for creative, but in your last 24 months, have you purchased parks with hard money, with bank debt? Are you raising capital? Are you not raising any capital and keeping all the deal for yourself? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I'd say I'm fairly conservative on debt. I was in real estate back in 2008. I owned a brokerage actually from, call it 2006 to 2008. So I saw that run up and just an absolute drop off, right? And that's when I started investing. I ran a brokerage, 2008, market crash. I was like, dang, I'm helping all these clients buy all these, foreclosures. I need to buy this stuff. So that's when I got into the investing, is after the market tanked. And so I'm definitely risk adverse. So typically what we do when we buy is we buy either with local bank or seller financing, okay? Portfolio wide, we're roughly 55% LTV. Portfolio wide. It's pretty low, seeing that a lot of people are aggressively leveraging their properties. We haven't, and that's really so we can sleep at night. Every deal that we buy, so let me back up. We buy with local bank debt or seller financing, bought a couple cash, but for the most part, they're financed somehow. We get the property turned around, stabilized, and then we refinance into non-recourse long-term debt. So we'll go to Fannie, Freddie, CMBS, which is conduit lending, and then, or like life companies. We do have, I want to say we have one or two large banks that have financed us, and we got non-recourse. I can't remember. Maybe there was a burn off of the recourse on it or something like that. But generally speaking, that's the business model, because we want to return investor capital. And so that's the debt side, right? The equity side is we have a fund, and we have been buying, we used to do syndications up until this year. So independently sponsoring each deal through a syndication. And then this year we kind of went a little bit different route. We went with a fund model, but they're relatively low leverage. And our whole goal is not to max out return on equity, all right? Which is very controversial, right? At least in real estate. Our goal is to maximize their return on their investment. And so our goal is to return as much, if not all of their capital at the time of refinance, and we don't pull out a penny more. We leave all that equity in the property. That keeps leverage down, keeps cash flow up. Everybody sleeps at night. They got their money. They can go reinvest it in our next deal or whatever, and they can turn that cash. But we don't need the extra capital out to go buy cool stuff with, and we don't need it to go buy other properties. So it's just being relatively conservative there.
Love that model. Yeah, that's pretty similar to what we're doing right now too. So I love that low leverage, low risk, high cash flow, because you can't really, I mean, you can take a giant cash out, on a refinance, but then it's like you got to place it somewhere because it's still debt,
Yes.
So
yes, it's still debt. It's costing you to hold that money. And on top of that, let me touch on one other thing that I'll rant again. You can tell there's certain little points that I get off on, but hard money. Man, don't be stupid using hard money to buy long-term cash flow assets. I know somebody that blew themselves up with hard money, and I won't mention names, but I'm at a conference a couple years ago. Nicest guy, like super good guy. He was new. He'd been around for like 6-9 months in the industry. Tells me that he's like, yeah, I bought this many parks. I'm like, man, I'm impressed. Like, there's nothing else to say but great job. He's like, they're awesome deals, whatever. I'm like, so how you financing? It's like, oh man, I get hard money, like 12% interest, blah, blah. I'm like, sweet. And I'm like, okay, so how long do those go for? 12 months. And I'm like, okay, you're screwed, man. And he's like, yeah, what do you do? And I explained exactly what I just did. And he goes, why do you do that? I said, can I just like have a heart to heart with you? Please don't do that anymore. You're going to get hurt. Like there's no way you can buy these heavy value add deals, turn them around in 12 months consistently, as predicted, and cash out these large balances, and you've got a pretty large nut to cover. You're probably not cash flowing very strong with that kind of an interest rate. You're just setting yourself up to die. Like, yeah, you get to keep more equity, but who cares? Like, if you lose it all, what's the point? So, anybody who's listening to this and hears anyone talking about using hard money to buy because they get to keep more ownership, man, run from that. Yeah. Run from that.
Yeah, because you're on the clock, and you have to perform. You have to season. That was another thing that I learned in the MHP industry was seasoning. Because in the single family space, it's like, okay, I can refi this with a DSCR loan in 90 days. I'll go to a local bank right now. I'm like, hey, I just bought this 90 days ago. Let's do a refi. They're like, come back in 2 years.
Not like, with the real banks. You can't do that. Yeah.
I'm like, 2 years? What are you talking about? But that's been a thing that I've learned recently is the seasoning. So talk to me about the deals because you're refining with agency debt for the most part.
We've done more CMBS and life companies, but agency too. Yep.
So you must be buying bigger deals, right? You're not buying 30, 40 unit deals. You're buying like 50 unit minimum.
50 occupied lots is kind of our starting point. So if it's, not 50 with 25 homes, and we don't really buy low occupancy properties, to be honest. That's another place that I've seen people really get hurt is they buy the 50% occupied park. It's a 100 space park with 42 homes in there. And you're like, same thing, right? You get to the point, loans up, got a refi, and you're under, 75%, 80%, 70% occupancy. And the lenders are looking at you like, this property's not stabilized. You can't get it refinanced. Now you're running for, a lender who will believe your pitch on what you're going to do in the future because you couldn't meet the mark before. And infill is the slowest and hardest, although the most profitable way to add value. I mean, it's a very risky proposition. So I know great operators that are just smart people that bought deals that were just too vacant and they couldn't hit the business plan, and now they're screwed and they're trying to figure out how to come up with the capital to buy a ton of homes all at once just to top it off so that they can refinance because their loans come and due. So I got off another rant there, but I think for us, 50 or more occupied lots is where it starts to get interesting. Will I look at something slightly smaller if it's in a, within our existing footprint or a market that I really want to be in? Sure, I'd look at something a little smaller, but I wouldn't buy a 40 space park as a one-off by any means.
Yeah, so you're going for basically the agency requirements, 50 lots, paved roads, good MSA, and then anything less you'll look at, but it's got to make sense with like a local bank or something like that, because you're not going to, you're not going to refi into agency debt on a 32 unit park.
No, not unless it's a very high lot rent market. Yeah. In like Tampa,
Florida or something.
Right.
That's awesome. So
I mean, I think. Can I point out one other reason why we do that?
Yeah.
It's because I want to make sure that I can get that sexier debt on the back end, right? Contingent liabilities are something that people don't know about. And on your personal financial statement, there's typically a section that says, what are your contingent liabilities? That's all the shadow debt that you've signed off on personally, that if it defaults, they're going to go after you personally. So, lenders look at that, and certain lenders look at it more than others. But I want to get everybody who says if you're not willing to sign on the loan personally, you don't believe in yourself and you don't believe in your abilities. No, that's crap. That's taking on unnecessary risk in an investment. And once the property's stabilized, I want the bank to come in and take some extra liability off me And I want to get all that contingent liability off my personal financial statement so I can keep borrowing, right? And I can keep scaling, because at some point a lender's going to be like, man, you got so much personal debt, even though it's not in your name, you're signed onto it, you're topped off, like you're capped. Yeah. And I don't ever want to do that at the pace that we're trying to buy. Like, you can't have that.
No, that's just a lender's sales pitch. It's like, this is what you say to the borrowers to get them to sign on the debt is you say that crap. Because, do you
really believe in the deal? Yes, but I also don't want to be wiped out if something that I can't control happens, because there are things that happen that we can't control. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so we need to protect our downside risk. Something that a lot of people focus on the upside only, but they don't pay attention that your debt is actually, there's typically more downside risk in a deal than there is upside. If you think about that, your debt is usually more than your equity. So I want to make sure that I can't go further down that I can up, right? It's risk-adjusted returns.
I'm very glad you say that, because when I was younger, I was dumb, and I was more so on the lines of Grant Cardone, the more debt, the better. But as I've gotten older, I've kind of leaned towards Dave Ramsey and taking chips off the table and lowering risk and all of that. But there is something to be said about being bankable, and building your balance sheet. Are you going for more bank debt deals or seller finance deals?
Both. I mean, if we can get seller financing, we'll do it. But one thing that we don't do is we don't take crap terms just because it's seller financing. We're bankable, right? Mm-hmm. If their asset isn't bankable, or they need us to let them finance the property for tax reasons, cool, we're okay with that, as long as the terms are similar to what we can get from a bank. But if you're going to say, I want 10% interest on a 2-year balloon, 15-year I'm just making up crazy terms, right? Yeah. I'm like, I'll just go to the bank. Like, there's no reason to do that. I'll do it if it helps you, but you got to give me terms that make sense. So, I mean, would I take a slight difference in interest for seller financing? Maybe, because it's non-recourse going in, and, there's maybe some flexibility in that, but I'm not overpaying on that debt for it. We'll just get a bank. And usually, when you're talking to a seller, it's how you frame it, right? I'll cash you out, no problem. But the problem is we're looking at banks, and what they're going to like, this isn't bankable. So if you want us to buy this, you're going to have to carry it for a little while, so that we'll make your property bankable, and so we can cash you out. Or, look, you want us to carry the financing, if you want to carry the financing for your benefit of the taxes, cool. Yeah. But we don't need you to. Yeah. And so I think that's how to frame it to get them to see it as a benefit to them, because a lot of people, especially in your first few deals, it's like, would you consider carrying financing? I don't ever ask somebody to carry the financing, let alone ask them to I don't ever ask for money either from the equity. Do you prefer to be cashed out, or do you need the existing loan to be assumed, or do you need, to carry some paper for tax purposes? That's the way I ask it. Like, what do you need? And we can do it any of those ways. And then obviously if the property's not bankable, then that's a different story. But
yeah, you get huge leverage if it's not bankable. So that, I mean, that's huge. So I have to ask this question, ask it to every single guest, right? It's the MHP CashFlow Podcast. I love the cash flow aspect to the mobile home park space. I think it solves a lot of problems. It alleviates a lot of stress in life. The big equity plays are great, but I think we're all kind of gearing towards cash flow and building up that monthly recurring revenue. Mm-hmm. So talk to me about your best cash flowing deal. One deal that you bought that you were like, man, this is life changing. Like, what was that deal like? Walk me through that deal.
I'll tell you the first deal I did. So I agree with you. If you just want upside, don't buy mobile home parks. You can buy other things for growth. This is the reason you buy mobile home parks is for growth. There's good upside, but it's really because it's a cash flowing asset and you can buy them and still make cash flow while you own them. So the first deal I bought was interesting. A commercial banker buddy of mine came to me and goes, hey, I know you're looking for apartments, but I got this mobile home park and it's actually in your backyard. So I went and checked it. I wasn't super excited about trailer parks at the time, nor was anybody. But I started looking at the numbers and I'm like, dang, this is really good. And it was actually a non-performing note. I had bought non-performing notes on the single family side at pretty high volume. Excuse me. And he knew that, and so he's like, hey, this is a pretty interesting deal. It's a non-performing loan. You can buy it from this other bank locally. Why don't you take a look at it? And we bought that deal. It was super hairy, like super hairy deal. The seller was a developer, bought it he had a $4 million mortgage on it, 4.2 or something like that. And he was going to develop it. Market tanked. He was speculating, right? And he bought the land and, the market tanked and he owned a mobile home park. And so he's super upside down on this thing. It was never worth $4 million at that time as a park. And there was over $1 million in code enforcement liens.
Wow.
So the seller was trying to sell it on a short sale, so people would go to him and they'd try and negotiate something with the bank. And once they figured out that there was $1 million in code enforcement liens, they just walk away. It was just too messy, right? So by us going in the back door, buying the note, we put the note under contract. Then we went and negotiated a deal with the county. All right, and we said, hey, look, we're about to wipe you out because now we're going to be the first lien holder, and this lien's ahead of yours. We're going to wipe you out, but we want to be friends because you could just make our life hell after that, right? You could just come in and start going after us and hitting us with constant violations, and that's not what we're trying to do. We want to clean the property up, and we want it to be nice. So we actually without getting in too much detail, ended up negotiating that deal with the county first in our due diligence, and then what's crazy about this deal is that it was actually in receivership with the bank. And if anybody knows anything about receivership, it means that a receiver steps in, takes over management of the property and the financials. So our financials were court-certified financials. You never get that with a mobile home park, especially a distressed mobile home park, right? So we had very clean financials. We bought the note. We foreclosed on it, took it back. We bought that deal for $750,000-ish, okay? This is a 57-space park in Naples, Florida. Prime location. And then we ended up going back to the borrower and saying, hey, look, man, you got a personal guarantee for $4 million. What are we going to do here? And he said, let's talk. So we negotiated a deal. He gave us $100-something thousand over a 6-month period, which reduced our basis down to like $625. Okay, we used the cash to improve the property and refinanced in like, I want to say it was like 16 months, returned our $150,000 investment that we made. The rest was we used debt and owned it till 2019. So that we technically took over operations in 2014. We sold it December of 2019. For $6.5 million. So we bought it for $625, sold it for $6.5 million, netted like $5.7 million cash at closing after the debt because we had very little debt. We did the same thing I said. We refinanced the property, only took out what we initially put into it. So we had very low debt. We were cash flowing multiple 6 figures a year on that property. It was one of those deals where you kind of didn't really want to sell it.
Yeah.
Because it was just so much cash flow. But when somebody offers you just an insane price like that, you go, okay, I don't know if we're going to get this price again. So like, we better take this. And I was like kind of hoping they wouldn't perform because it was cash flowing so strong. And I don't know off the top of my head the numbers, like what we were making cash flow, but because I know you asked me specifics, but we were probably at multiple six figures a year on that. It was an insane deal.
At least $15K a month after debt service, after all expenses.
Yeah, I think it was closer to. Don't hold me to this, but I think it was closer to $300,000 a year.
Oh my
on that deal.
Man, I gotta say,
cash flow.
I gotta say,
actually,
out of all of the guests so far, that is by far the best deal that I've heard. And it was
Well,
your
I wish
first
every deal was like that. That was the first deal. So now you know why I went all in on mobile home parks, because I was like, now keep in mind, I bought my next mobile home park, within a year of that first one. So it wasn't like, I had the time to, or the ability to see that that's how that deal was going to turn out. Actually, I just pulled it up. Yeah. So we were doing $28,743 a month. Net cash flow.
Yeah, that'll change your life. That's a life-changing deal.
5.7 net will definitely change your life. Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's incredible.
But
man.
it was an awesome deal, and it's something that, I always tell people, not every deal is going to be like that, of course, right?
No.
Most won't. But the fact that an industry has an opportunity to do one deal and make that kind of money, there's not many property types that you can do that in.
It's insane. That's amazing, man.
Full disclosure, we did take on a fair amount of risk, and it was a super hairy deal. Not so much physically, there wasn't tons of physical improvements to do, but buying non-performing loans with, $1 million code enforcement liens, you really got to understand what you're buying. We had very good legal counsel on that deal, and I'd bought a lot of notes before that, so I understood, not because I'm special, it's just I had the experience to do a deal like that. Not knowing that type of strategy, it would be a very risky deal to take on.
Wow. Incredible
It paid
deal,
off,
man.
though.
Congrats on
thanks.
that. That's
Thanks, man.
That's pretty amazing.
Thanks. It was pretty cool.
Dude, thanks for coming on. I mean, we could talk for hours about this, but I know you're limited on time. So thanks for coming on. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple places. For those people who are looking to invest capital, equitygrowth.net is our fund. Those who are looking to get out there and actually buy communities, be active operators like us, getrealcashflow.com. I have an entire education company around educating investors on buying mobile home parks, doing it the right way so you can make real money and not blow yourself up after a year or two. And that's getrealcashflow.com, but I'm on all the socials, so I put out a ton of content there to just give free info too. So anything I could do to help, love to help. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. Thank you for listening, everybody. Make sure to like and subscribe on the podcast. Make sure to leave a review on Spotify. This video will be posted on YouTube, so check it out on YouTube as well. And this was the episode number, I believe, 7 on the MHP CashFlow Podcast. And so thanks for coming on. We'll see you all in the next episode.